They were good co-workers at first, but after one incident, the circumstances of which we have yet to learn, he came to hate them. The man with the mug of freshly ground coffee in his hand is Han Yusan, whose nickname is simple and brief, Luke. He is also a former ally of the warrior squad. But now something happened that can't be explained. His entire former squad of warriors, whom he just can't stand, has moved into the world of the 21st century. Well, since that's the case, let's introduce them all in order. The guy with the golden eyes who just asked Luke if he could drink water from this strange well is Leonard von Greenheim. He is the leader of the squad and the youngest warrior who is experienced beyond his years. Looking wistfully at an advertisement for steamy lingerie, Valian Rex, the strongest barbarian warrior and sexually aroused Namnik, remarked that there were many beauties in this world too. But sitting next to an embarrassed clergywoman and rabid chastity fanatic, Sylvia disagreed with him. These women are so shameless. It's indecent. On the same couch sits Murney, looking at the magazine with interest. Catwoman, master thief and kleptomaniac. Luke, open the window! How dare those filthy people stare at me! Alicia Moon shouted indignantly, pressing herself against the glass. This girl is a ghost elf and also a rabid racist. Yanking a tablet with a terrified artificial intelligence, Luxie, the kingdom's best mage and a highly dangerous psychopath, asks Luke if she can take the startling thing apart and look inside. The war is over, but how long can they last on the battlefield called society? And will they be able to get Yusan's forgiveness? Get out of here, you bastards! Luke yelled in rage, crushing the coffee mug in his hand into shards. In a forest somewhere in the mountains of the kingdom, the bright lights of torches can be seen. Catch up with them! They couldn't have gotten far! The guard suddenly shouted. Several dozen knights with sniffer dogs, torches in hand, chase the criminals trying to escape. Meanwhile, a group of people are running through the woods trying to escape pursuit. It's a squad of warriors who defeated the devil. Damn it, is that what we did wrong? Murney said irritably. With a glance at her, Alicia explained that the squad had made some kind of mistake. Maybe the fault was that some bulky man had mocked the guards' stupidity and made fun of their lower bodies. What's with the attacks? It's not like I even said anything, Valian replied when he heard their conversation. Looking at him mockingly, Alicia asked if he didn't like what she was saying. Did it hurt him? In turn, Myrni, running beside her, asked what a tax even was. He ignored her ridiculous question, but the man noted that Luke said things like that to him all the time. Don't make accusations based on nothing. A sepulchral silence hung in the air after their former partner's name was mentioned. Running in the vanguard, Leo asked his comrades what would be different if Luke were here. Sylvia reminded him that this man had always helped them avoid making stupid decisions. Maybe things would be better than they were now. Such words from the priestess made the pink-haired Catwoman very angry. Stop talking about someone who isn't here! Your mutterings are getting tiresome! She shouted irritably, glaring at the girl running ahead of her. Does she really think Luke would help if he were here? Murney thinks the opposite, that the guy would have finished them all off and would never help. Isn't that right, silly girl? The Catwoman asked with a smirk, glancing at the elf who was keeping up with her. Catwoman asked with a smirk, glaring at the elf who kept up with her. Alicia gave her partner an indignant look and demanded that she not call her that, or she would kill her. Sylvia was tired of listening to this silly bickering and asked her friends to stop fighting. But at that moment, an unknown essence materialized above the girl's head. Hooray! Divine revelation! We have survived! God has not forsaken us yet! A squad of warriors cheered as they looked at the strange thing above the priestess's head. Suddenly, the almighty deity spoke on Sylvia's behalf. My children, trust me, said the creature, towering above the ground and delighting everyone here with its mere appearance. Trust me and jump off the cliff, the goddess added, pointing her finger at the cliff. In the same second, the divine power evaporated from the priestess's body, and Sylvia looked awkwardly at her partners. What does that mean? Does she really mean, when she speaks of the cliff, for the troop to jump off Carb's rock? Leaning toward the priestess, Valian asked if the goddess had said anything else. But the girl lowered her head and explained that there had been no further revelations. Damn it! It's like going to your death! Murney yelled in anger, kicking the rock. But despite all the risks, the squad leader said in all seriousness, let's go. The other team members looked at him dumbfounded and asked what he was talking about. Is the leader crazy or something? Leo, on the other hand, responded to these outrages by saying that he's not crazy, and that's why he's proposing to do it. It is worth looking at this situation from a different perspective. The main question now is what is better? To die now in obedience to the goddess, or be caught and die of torture? If they get caught, they won't die that easily. I'd rather die quickly here than be caught and die in agony, Leonard said courageously. After saying that, he immediately headed towards the cliff without thinking. Realizing the hopelessness of the situation, Myrni accepted her fate and decided to follow her commander's example. There was nothing left for them to do but die. Calling all her comrades lunatics, the elf did not object. As her bandmates leisurely made their way toward the cliff, the priestess looked at them and decided to take the cross and pray a farewell prayer. But at the last moment, she changed her mind. Has it really been 3 years since they all joined together? And now all the members of the warrior squad are standing in full force, standing and looking fearfully into the abyss beneath their feet. Myrni, looking out over the cliff, suggests in a trembling voice that the comrades agree on one thing. If they die now, then by no means should they meet in the next one. The priestess immediately agreed with her partner. Valian, standing nearby, supported the decision and remarked that he did not want to meet such a fate again. Luxie didn't stay away and agreed to the suggestion as well. Okay, let's not meet again, Alicia Moon said tensely. Go, Leo said briefly, then took a step into the unknown. Everyone else followed the leader's example and jumped in after him. Just like that, the squad of warriors who saved the world fell into an endless abyss. The leader of the guards rode his horse up to the cliff and looked down thoughtfully. So, after all, they had died in vain? Yeah, it was probably the best choice for them, because there's nowhere for them to go back to anyway. Turning around to his men, the commander-in-chief ordered a platoon to be sent to investigate. We need to at least find their corpses! It was early in the night when it was still dark. When Catwoman opened her eyes, she saw the cloudless sky and the foliage of the trees. Lifting herself off the ground, she immediately tried to figure out where she was. What had even happened? Were they dead? Is this Valhalla? What's that smell in here? Came the voice of a waking Valian, not understanding why it was so dark in here. While the enraged Elfess was kicking the barbarian, screaming that nothing smelled there, an upraised Leo asked what had happened. At the same second, a strange rustling sound was heard nearby. A silhouette began to appear in the bushes. Leonard gestured to the awake members of the squad to prepare for battle and asked the stranger in the bushes who he was. Who the fuck else could it be? Holy shit! Wait, what the hell? Han Yusong said, adjusting his tie as he saw the Cretans in front of him. Luke, it's Luke! Of course it is! I knew the goddess would send us help. Goddess, thank you! The squad members started cheering again when they saw their former comrade. Walking up to him, Leo decided to greet his former partner, noting how long it had been since they had seen each other. But at the same second, Yusan, standing opposite, decided to play football with his face, smacking the guy's jaw with great force using his foot. This lightning strike was like a sudden thunderstorm. It was as if Han Yusong had been saving up this anger for years and was finally able to take it out on the person he hated the most. The attack was so powerful that the squad leader immediately lost consciousness. The other members of the group watched all of this, looking at their former comrade perplexed. Funny? The guy inquired, stomping the passed-out Leo into the ground. As the squad members still sitting in front of him asked Luke what was wrong, the young man gave them a creepy look and laughed. In a touching reunion after a long time, Luke Yusan was in desperate need of a cigarette. I wish I could dismember you, scumbags, the guy said hatefully, pointing his finger at the 6 of them. A few hours earlier, as the sun was nearing sunset, Han Yusong was riding in a car and talking to his mother on the phone. Sitting behind the wheel, the boy asked her to eat more and take care of her health. The woman told her son not to worry and invited him to come home next New Year's Eve. Laughing, the young man pulled into the parking lot and remarked that it wasn't that rare for him to be home. He came to visit every month. Yusan talked to his mother some more before saying goodbye and getting out of the car. After locking the vehicle with the key, the guy leisurely made his way to his apartment. You have arrived, Mr. Yusan, came the voice of the artificial intelligence as the young man stepped inside. The fellow at once said hello to the assistant, and the latter in turn asked if Mr. Yusan would like to hear today's news about foreign stocks or the rate of stocks at home. Aram, this artificial intelligence program that was obtained from an acquaintance during distribution a few years ago. It's now Yusan's secretary. But it was originally created to protect state-level employees, but a serious miscalculation was discovered, and an acquaintance secretly took it away. So he let the artificial intelligence act on its own. "Mr. Yuson, I planted a virus on voice phishing today. Please praise me," Aram cheerfully narrated. Well, it's still not a first-class demon, but a rogue. But anyway, looking awkwardly at the secretary, the guy asked to only touch minor rogues from now on. It's been 10 years. It's been a full 10 years since returning from Midgard. 10 years ago, when Yuson was 17 years old. He went to another world, Midgard. As soon as the guy opened his eyes, he found himself in a slave market in the middle of the desert. And because he was young and all his limbs were intact, the boy was immediately sold into gladiatorial slavery. Contrary to expectations that going to another world would give him abilities, Yuson turned out to have no skills or any connections and had to live worse than a pet. By day, they hunted for his life, and at night, the guy's ass was in danger. In the end, for the sake of survival, Yuson staked his life. He managed, like in the movies, to stage a riot and escape. The young man had been a fugitive in the desert for 2 years, and 3 more years in the city as a mercenary. Having saved up a certain amount of money and having a small surplus, the boy began looking for a way to return to his original world. One day in one of the cities, he came across a recruitment for a warrior squad. In case of great merits in defeating the devil, it was promised that the goddess would fulfill any wish. This is it, the very method that Yuson was looking for. After applying for a warrior squad, the young man passed a test with a 5,000 to 1 chance that reminded him of getting a job with a large company. He eventually became a member of the warrior squad. The boy was a porter. The main question was whether his reading, writing, and bookkeeping skills would be useful. Well, in this world, 90% of the population is illiterate. In any case, Yuson joined the warrior squad as a porter for another 5 years. And soon, they succeeded in defeating the devil. And to get home, he fought to the death. The boy put his heart and soul into accumulating as much merit as possible. However, what a son of a bitch he really was! All because of those fucking assholes who called themselves warriors. At the time they caught the devil together, Yuson was already 27 years old, and all he's left with is loose hair, wrinkles, and problems. That's when the desperate man came to the goddess. The almighty being agreed to grant the guy's wish for his selflessness. She hoped that the man would like the reward and be happy. Thus, Han Yusong returned to reality, to the age of 17, to a time when he had not yet traveled to another world. Realizing that money and power are justice in this hellish world, after graduating from high school, Yuson passed the exam and became a debt collector. He then increased his fortune in investments and cryptocurrency. After that, the guy took over a bankrupt gaming company and even created a game based on the world of Midgard. Sitting down at his computer, Yuson launched the Midgard game. Gee, a man who wants to forget about it does something like this? Hearing this reasoning out loud, Aram asked Mr. Yuson if he was talking about his experience in a conscious dream. Turning around to him, the boy shouted that it was not a conscious dream, but reality. The secretary then voiced his concern about the chief's mental health. The young man, in turn, explained that his mental state had become so because of those damn warriors. Anyway, now is not the time to talk about it. At the moment, Yuson needs to fulfill a daily quest in the game. After finding a team, the guy lost almost immediately. When the young man asked his teammates what they had been doing all this time, the healer said that the guy couldn't do anything himself and was hounding them. The warrior from his squad laughed and supported this, and then they both logged out. What a bunch of trolls! Han Yusong shouted, unable to contain his anger after 3 hours of fruitless play. Aram immediately informed his boss that his heart rate was accelerating. Then he asked if Mr. Yuson wanted to stop. Annoyed, taking a glass of Coke, the young man exhaled and said that he needed to calm down. The most important thing is unbreakable character. It's normal to be in such a state. In any case, the main thing now is that he doesn't get trolls in his squad again. Soon a team was found for the lad. Child? Came a rather familiar voice from the game. Looking puzzled at the monitor, Yuson wondered aloud if there was a voice function here. Meanwhile, a strange voice asked if the guy didn't remember her. Setting his glass of Coke on the table with a clatter, the young man remarked in surprise that it looked like the other principal had done a good job. But when had he added this update? What a shame. No matter how much time has passed, but how could you forget me? Came the mysterious voice from the game again. The mother of all fights. Is it really you? Han Yusong inquired, finally remembering. But just as the goddess, pleased that he hadn't forgotten her, spoke again, The guy punched the monitor screen with a lightning-fast punch, silencing her abruptly. Wow, so that was real? Ara muttered in surprise as he looked at his superior, who had punched the monitor through with his fist. But when the bewildered goddess asked her child what that sound was, the steamy Yusan corrected his hair and explained that nothing special had happened. "Long time no see, Mother of War," the guy said, looking at the broken monitor. The goddess, however, explained that it was her middle name, and so she asked the young man to just call her EI. It's just between her and him. In turn, the puzzled Yusan asked why such frankness. Is there such a relationship between the two of them? The voice from the monitor agreed with that. Then the deity took a moment to notice that his presence did not appear to be particularly welcome here. Looking at her coldly, Yusan decided to be honest and said that it was true. Her voice alone reminded him of the bad days when he was struggling to get out of that place. The goddess, however, repented and admitted that it was all her fault. The problem arose because she had failed to take proper care of her children. And so she hopes that Yusan won't hate Midgard so much. Better to let him hate the goddess instead. Eventually, the guy decided to talk to her and inquired about what was going on in that world. Before delving into the story, the goddess decided to get to the main point first. She needs the help of a young man. Looking at her in surprise, the boy asked what he could do to help. The deity then asked if Yusan could go to the mountain closest to him. Of course, the help won't be free. The goddess will give the lad an elixir and the tree sap of the world tree. But first he must go to the mountain. And now a few hours have passed, and a madly laughing Yusan is already standing in the woods across from his former squadmates. Here's the thing. The elixir is a miracle medicine that not only heals the soul, but also increases lifespan. The sap of the world tree is an all-powerful elixir that can cure any disease and even disability. And the reason the goddess is offering these treasures is because Yusan has to help these scum. I wish I could dismember you scumbags, the guy said hatefully, pointing his finger at the 6 of them. Enraged by this behavior, Valiant immediately pounced on Yusan, preparing to pound him into the ground with a single blow of his fist. The man immediately used the barbarian's rage. He was convinced that if he did not strike first, he would surely die. That was why, as soon as Valiant was near his former comrade, he smashed his fist into his chest with great power. But the blow didn't reach its target. Han Yusong easily stopped the attack by grabbing the man's arm. He then toppled his opponent with one sharp movement and pinned him to the ground with a clatter. If you didn't have magical powers, I would have mixed you with shit back then. Bastard, Yusan said, glaring coldly at the man. In the next instant, he delivered another blow to the chest of his dazed opponent. While the guy was dealing with the enemy, the already recovered squad leader jumped on him from behind, preparing to strike the young man with his sword. But it was no surprise to Yusan. He immediately turned around and, Bruce Lee style, put his palm to the chest of his opponent. Have you ever heard of a 1-inch punch? The boy asked, looking at the dazed Leo. After saying that, he clenched his palm into a fist and punched his opponent in the chest with incredible force, throwing him several meters away from himself. From this incredible attack, Leonard flew into the air and disappeared somewhere not far away in the trees. Still not understanding what was going on, Sylvia asked Luke why he was acting like this. Then, pulling out a staff from behind her back, the girl said in a trembling voice that it was self-defense and asked the guy to stay away from her. Thank you. I was just in need of a baton, and this is just right, Yusan said, suddenly running up to the priestess. Immediately afterward, he snatched the staff from her hand and looked at it contentedly. Only after a while did Sylvia, in tears, notice that as she ran past, Luke had broken her arm. Yusan glanced back at her and put his baton over his shoulder, noting that the girl had had enough. Meanwhile, the nearby elf was already trying to call out to the spirits. But when Alicia realized that the spirit, for some reason, was not appearing, she had already seen a staff flying at great speed into her in front of her face. After seeing the way Luke bludgeoned her partner with the mace, a terrified Murney realized she had no other choice. The only chance of survival is to escape from this bloody battlefield. In turn, Yusan, holding the priestess's staff in his hand, looked at the fleeing Catwoman with shame. Bending over, he picked up a small stone from the ground. At the same moment, with a wave of his hand, the guy threw that stone at the fleeing Murney. The projectile flew with great speed into the shin of the Catwoman trying to escape, knocking her to the ground. While somewhere not too far away, there were wailing screams of pain, Yusan walked over to the last member of the squad. So you won't resist? The boy inquired, glancing at the mage girl. Putting her staff on the ground, Luxie said that she had no magic power, and therefore she could not defeat Luke. After that, she humbly surrendered and asked for mercy. Hearing this, Han Yu-song tapped his mace on his hand with a satisfied expression and remarked that he knew the enchantress would say something like that. How good it was to be smart and be able to assess the situation. Soon, after the guy didn't hit Luxie hard enough, only moans of pain began to be heard in the neighborhood. Taking the phone out of his pocket, Yusan asked the goddess if she would rebuke him for it. But the omnipotent being said she had no right to do so. However, she would like the guy to show kindness for once. Kindness? The irritated young man interjected. Looking angrily at the phone, Yusan wondered if he hadn't been kind enough by not killing them. The goddess awkwardly asked her child to listen to the end. Child, in the past, when I sent you to your world, I gave you back all the time you lost. At least remember that by being kinder. Hearing her out, the boy wondered. Perhaps he wouldn't have beaten up his former partners if the goddess had mentioned it from the beginning. But she had only reminded him of it after the young man had vented all his anger. Dodgy, no, from now on, Yusan would have to be smart. Sighing, the guy scratched the back of his head and said that he would need potions first. The goddess was glad that he hadn't crossed that line. Then, holding back tears of happiness, said that she didn't doubt him. This young man is a very good child. Looking at the contents of the bag the squad had brought with them from the other world, Luke realized that it should be enough. Giving it to Luxie, the guy asked her to get 2 of them drunk with the potion and to dab some on the wounds of the girls with broken leg and arm. When the mage girl asked why she had to do it, the young man explained that he hit her the weakest. If she was fine, she could start already. However, the sorceress pointed her finger at her head and said that she was in pain too. Fortunately, it didn't take long to persuade her, and as soon as Yusan offered to hurt her more, Luxie immediately took the bag, saying she understood. Some time passed, and all those who had suffered at Han Yu-song's hand woke up. The squad members sat in front of the guy and looked at him irritably, while the mage girl standing to the side stared blankly into the void. Look me in the eye. You want a second round? I don't really care, the young man said, glaring at his former comrades. The priestess, sitting on her knees, asked Luke if he was going to kill them. Laughing, Yusan realized that even after 10 years, Sylvia was still just as clueless. If he really wanted to kill them, he would have done it at once. Hearing this, the priestess asked how a whole 10 years could have passed. After all, it had only been 3 years in their world. And besides, if he didn't intend to kill them, then what was the matter? Showing the squad his phone, the guy explained that he had recently received an errand from the EI. Turning around, he advised his former comrades, if everyone was awake, to follow him. Rising to her feet, an annoyed Alicia Moon can't believe she couldn't do anything against this guy. If she had magical power, things would have turned out differently. Valian, walking beside her, explained to the stupid girl that she wouldn't have been able to deal with Luke even with that. He's on a different level. It's not like the others. It doesn't even compare to 3 years ago. The man reminded him that it had been Luke who had single-handedly won the battle against the general of the Devil's army 3 years ago. And he had grown even stronger since then. And without magic, he could easily defeat even Barbarian and Leon. Their conversation was overheard by the squad leader walking ahead. Luke is strong, confirmed Leo, who turned around on them, smiling awkwardly. He's really gotten a lot stronger than he was 3 years ago. A white minivan speeding down the highway somewhere in the center of town. A delighted Mirni, sitting in the passenger seat of the car, gazes admiringly out the window. It is the first time she sees such a beautiful and huge city. Also gazing out at the night metropolis, Luxie turned to Luke, asking permission to ask a few questions. Han Yu-song, who was sitting behind the wheel of the vehicle, did not refuse her. The girl immediately asked the first question. Does this carriage they are in now move with magic? The boy explained that it moved by simple technology. Then is this city so special that it has such incredible carriages? The enchantress inquired, looking at the driver. However, to her surprise, the young man replied that this was not true, and every family had cars. Let's take Midgard as an example. A car is equivalent to such a thing that every villager has. Luxie then decided to ask a second question. Are they really in the capital of this world right now? Yusan explained that it was only one of many cities. By the way, there is no such thing as the capital of the world. But there are quite a lot of countries, and the strongest country among all can be called the center of the world. After listening to him, the sorceress asked what the situation was in the country they were in now. The boy told her that he didn't know about the military strength, but the economy seemed to be on the 10th place. Amazing, said a dumbfounded Luxie as she continued to stare at the night metropolis. Yusun looked back at her and noticed that the girl's face still looked confused. Does anyone have a carriage like that? The country's 10th largest economy? And this place is one of many cities? Jesus, what the hell does that mean? After a while, all 7 of them arrived at Han Yusong's house. As soon as they entered the apartment, Aram immediately greeted the supervisor. Seeing some strangers, the secretary asked who these people were. Were they Mr. Yuson's guests? With an irritated sigh, the guy in the suit explained that first of all, they were unwelcome guests. In that case, Aram decided to put the defense on level 3 and change the video surveillance in the room to 24 hours. Looking at the clipboard hanging on the wall, Luxie wondered if it was Ego's weapon. Approaching Luke, the girl reminded him that he had said that there was no magic in this world. But then, where did Ego's weapon come from? Looking at her, the young man clarified that it wasn't Ego's weapon. It's an artificial intelligence. It could be considered an imaginary person. And though you believe that this building itself is a weapon of the ego, I think this will make it easier for you to understand that, Yusun said, looking awkwardly at the squad of warriors. And I'm warning you, if a single thing from this house is broken or missing, you're dead men, the guy added, pointing a finger at them. After hearing him out, the squad looked at Luke perplexed. You? Will it break or will it go away? After pondering this, the 5 of them looked at thee as if nothing had happened to Mirny standing next to them. What? I haven't done anything yet! Catwoman shouted indignantly, feeling the stares of her companions. Yep. Yet. Opening a can of Coke, Yusun clarified with the goddess if she really wanted a guy to guarantee their existence. What do you think? Asked the goddess from the phone. The young man asked her not to be snippy. After all, he had already brought these dumbasses here, and now he needed to figure out what to do next. Sipping his soda, Yusun looked at his former teammates sitting on the couch. Sylvia and Alicia, suffering from mythology, might understand the guy. We have to be patient. But Yusun doesn't know what the hell he's gotten himself into. Turning to the entire troop, the young man told them that the goddess wanted him to help them survive. More specifically, she wants the guy to help them adapt to the world. Waving it off, Yusun pointed out that he certainly didn't know what the 6 of them were doing in Midgard. But anyway, they're back in trouble, because that's what they do. Angry at the words he had said, Alicia jumped up from the couch and, pointing her finger at Luke, shouted that she had not sinned. Then the girl demanded the boy to watch his words and not to treat her like a criminal. But when Yusun asked the elven girl under what circumstances she had become a fugitive, the stunned girl couldn't answer anything. In any case, the guy wasn't interested in her unfair circumstances anyway. Anyway, there's only one thing he has to do. 1 year minimum. I will help you to adapt to this world during this time. This means that I will teach you the structure and knowledge of this world, as well as features for survival. After saying that, a surprised Alicia asked Luke why he was putting so much effort into training them. You ask why? Because the thought of having to see your stupid faces every day makes me wildly nauseous, Yusun explained, walking over to the elfling. Then the guy asked her not to forget that they were not co-workers to begin with. They were worse than strangers to each other. It was more like an enemy relationship, so the squad should do their best to learn how to survive, then get the hell out of here. If learning from someone like Yusun hurt someone's ego, then that person would have to accept it. From the moment they entered this house, everything was a goddess's request and nothing more. Turning around, the young man decided to give the squad a day to think. Aram would teach them how to use the equipment. Having said that, Yusun walked out of the living room, leaving the former comrades alone with the secretary. They sat silent for a while longer, not knowing what to say in such a situation. Anyone hungry? Aram decided to ask to break the awkward silence. Raising a hand, Valian pointed out that, above all else, they needed to eat to survive. Yes, he was a shameless barbarian. Soon the table was already set with various food and drinks. Taking a slice of pizza, Mirny carefully took a small bite to taste what it even was. After tasting this food of the gods, Catwoman was incredibly surprised. Luke, that bastard, has the best cook in the world! When she noticed that Alicia had already begun to eat all the food on the table, Mirny asked if elves could eat meat. But the golden-haired girl just told her partner to shut up and continued eating. Leon sighed frustratedly, noting that Luke still disliked them. Catwoman agreed, adding that the guy hated the warrior squad even more than he hated the demons. As he'd said, their relationship was more like an adversarial one. That's the way it is. Murney was just about to remind them of where it had started and what had happened in Fildia village, but Sylvia, sitting next to her, asked her to stop. The pink-haired Catwoman apologized, after which a sepulchral silence hung in the air. Meanwhile, Han Yu-song, sitting in his room, was already writing something and talking on the phone. He asked for help in finding a way to legally make 6 ID cards. He then asked not to ask anything else and promised to send a photo soon. But the man on the other side asked what the situation was. Yuson explained that these people were some kind of refugees who had entered the country illegally. When the guy finished talking, the goddess said that she was sorry. She didn't know that there were so many difficult conditions to fulfill in this world in order to exist. Sighing heavily, the young man asked EI to forget about it. He's only doing this because he's being paid for it. The goddess immediately reassured him, saying that she remembered it. Moreover, the Almighty swore by her name that she would keep her promise. Of course, this was all on condition that the guy would hold his grudge and promise to help these children. Without answering her, Yuson realized that these 6 were the most problematic people he'd ever had to deal with. The next morning came. Looking at the wall clock, Han Yusong noticed that the time was already nearing noon. What do they even do in the middle of the day? The boy asked irritably. EI asked the young man to understand. For the past 3 months, these children had not been able to rest easy, and their fatigue had made itself felt. Sitting back in his chair, Yuson asked the goddess what was so wonderful about those bastards that she kept taking their side. EI in turn explained that she only wished the guy would be more welcoming to them. That is not an acceptable request, said the young man, reading a book. At that moment, a dark-haired girl entered his office. When Luke looked at her, he was surprised that Sylvia, who used to torment him by making him pray every dawn, was awake just before dinner. The priestess explained that it was because she was tired. Yes, you're right, Sylvia said suddenly. I became lazy and behaved rude because I was an apostle of the goddess. Thank you for reproaching me. After listening to her, Yuson asked her not to take it into her head. Then he asked her to go wash up and call the others for lunch. You might think she was wearing drool on her makeup. After saying that, Sylvia blushed and looked at Luke with embarrassment. A few minutes later, the splashing of water and women's voices could already be heard in the bathroom. Looking at the strange contraption above, the priestess noticed that the water was pouring automatically. Not understanding how that was possible, a surprised Luxie asked if it wasn't magic. She said that she had thought about it yesterday, but that the shower was truly astonishing. So it's not a well? Murney asked, looking at the toilet bowl while the secretary tried to dissuade her from drinking the water. The soap and shampoo are so fragrant, toothbrush and toothpaste, and even the towel and pajamas are soft as if made of lambskin. Every single thing is incredible. How advanced is this world anyway? Leo thought, looking at the toothbrush in his hand. After lunch, Han Yuson compiled all the dirty dishes into the dishwasher. Wiping his hands with a towel, the guy told the squad of warriors that their clothes would be delivered today during the day. Looking at him puzzled, Sylvia asked why they needed new clothes when they had the original ones. Luke, however, explained that if they went out in that, they would be circus monkeys. The young man doubted that they were okay with that. When the priestess asked the boy if the style of dress was much different in this world, Yuson asked Aram to show them some example. The secretary immediately showed a TV program about contemporary fashion. Luke immediately explained that it was common clothing in this world and asked his former partners to memorize it. As soon as Leon saw it, his nose bled. The indignant priestess remarked that it was obscene, but Myrna, standing behind him, liked the decision. It's so hot. Fuck, are you saying it looks indecent? You guys dressed more revealingly in your world, and this is indecent? It's just an example of underwear, so don't exaggerate, Yuson said irritably, pointing to the screen behind him. Sighing, Sylvia realized her mistake and immediately apologized. The boy then told her that yesterday, Aram had noticed the sizes of all the members of the squad and had ordered them underwear and clothes. When the boy asked them to pack, Alicia interrupted him, asking what that meant. You creep! Are our bodies really our bodies? The pixie shrieked, covering her breasts. The angry Yuson yelled at her, explaining that he wasn't crazy to stare at them. He'd rather stare at a goblin's naked body. The guy had just told Aram to do it because those assholes had been asleep for a long time. I'll tell you one more time. As soon as your clothes arrive, get ready to leave. We need to stop by the lawyer's office to make your identification cards. The young man added. Not sure what he was talking about, Leo asked what an identity card was. Can't you just go to the guild and get one? But Luke replied that it wasn't that simple. Taken aback, a weary Yusan realized the kindergarten teacher's anguish. It's been hours. As she touched her boom boxes with her hands, Mirni noticed that the clothes were incredibly comfortable. The priestess looked at her with embarrassment and asked her not to say such indecent things. Meanwhile, Yusan's lawyer explains to the guy that, first of all, if these people are caught as illegal immigrants, there will be big problems, so it is better to apply for refugee status. The man has an acquaintance there, so maybe they will approve. Yusan thanked his colleague and promised to put the money for his work into a virtual account. Soon the guy left the office, at the exit of which a squad of warriors was already waiting for him. The priestess jumped up from the couch and asked if everything was all right. Does it look like this? Luke asked, looking at her. The girl immediately apologized for the long time the young man had to waste because of them. But the guy joked that there was nothing wrong with that, and that he would take the entire fee from the IE anyway. In turn, the goddess sitting on his phone had explained to the guy that she didn't have the currency of this world. If all goes according to plan, you'll have your IDs in 2 months. Now let's go to the mall, Luke said, heading for the exit of the building. Although everyone on the squad didn't understand what shopping center even meant, they seemed to like the idea. Han Yu-song, noticing the bewilderment on his former comrades' faces, explained that a shopping mall was a place where everything was sold. From food to clothes to tools, they would go there to buy the things they needed. They'd go there to buy what they needed, so if they needed anything, the guy didn't mind them telling him. Mirni, hearing the words about freebies, immediately started begging for clothes and jewelry. Sylvia asked her partner if what Luke had already given them was not enough. Looking at Luke with shame, the rest of the team realized that his life had not taught him anything at all if he proposed such a thing to Mirni. It was late at night back in Midgard. As Luke slept, a knock was heard on the door of his chambers. Hearing someone call his name, the boy reluctantly woke up. Opening the door of the room, a yawning young man asked what was wrong. The knight standing on the threshold explained to Luke that one of his warriors had stolen the Margrave's safe. "Follow us now," ordered the guard, grabbing the boy by his robe. Still not knowing what was happening, the awake young man asked to wait. He was eventually dragged off to jail while a thief who had stolen the town's treasury played cards in a tavern. "It's Morny, you crazy bitch!" Looking at Catwoman, Yusan asked what to buy her. The girl immediately said she needed clothes and jewelry. Then the boy replied that he understood the clothes, but why she needed jewelry. A delighted Mirni explained that she wanted to see how beautiful the jewelry was in this world. If this world is advanced to such an extent, the jewelry craftsmanship must be amazing too. Then there must be a huge number of beautiful things here. Having said that, Catwoman began to wait for a response from the guy, swaying from side to side. "So," the girl said sweetly, looking at the young man charmingly. "And the snake is good at seduction," Yusong said with annoyance, holding his head. With such a feline temperament, you'd think she was from the Meow family. Luke looked at Mirni and decided to warn her right away. This world has a different level of policing than Midgard. Even if a master bandit came here, they'd all be caught in this world. A 98% chance. Especially if the girl is unable to use her magic here and doesn't watch her hands, she will be caught immediately. And the moment she's caught, all ties between her and Yusan are gone. But if it were Luke's wish, it would be better if Mirni forgot what he'd just said and stole something to get caught. The girl spoke suddenly, lowering her gaze. I was just genuinely looking forward to the opportunity to see how the craftsmanship of handcrafting has evolved. You don't have to worry so much about that. I'll remember your advice, though. After listening to her, Yusan turned around and smiled contentedly. That's great. This bad habit isn't going anywhere. Well done. One less freeloader. A few hours later, after shopping, a happily smiling Mirni thanked Luke for the clothes. The boy only looked at her suspiciously. When she saw his expression, she asked him what was wrong. No, nothing. The young man muttered, puzzled, averting his gaze. He couldn't actually believe it. That thief-obsessed girl, did she pocket anything? There's no way she's wised up. If it wasn't for her almighty skill and fighting ability, She would have been kicked out of the warrior squad a long time ago. But now this girl? If he sees some appetizing prey, just passing through? Something doesn't add up here. It's just not possible. Maybe Yuson missed something. Murney, what are these tricks? When the whole troop returned home, the secretary immediately greeted them. Approaching Aram, Yuson asked him to scan the bodies of everyone who had just entered the apartment. We need to check for precious metals. The artificial intelligence finished the scan and told him that nothing had been found. The guy asked if that was accurate, and Aram replied that he had indeed scanned everyone. They are completely clean. Then, with a little thought, Yuson realized what was wrong. She's got a head injury, right? There is simply no other explanation for this behavior. Meanwhile, Murney is already inspecting her new clothes. It's beautiful. It's much more refined than Midgard's, and even the trim is elegant. And the price is 1,000th the price of a suit worn by aristocrats. The girl wants very badly to buy some more of these clothes. But at the same time, she realizes that Luke is definitely not going to go for it. It was late evening. Entering Luke's office, Murney said that Aram had asked her to stop by the guy's office, and then asked what was wrong. Closing the book, the young man said that the girl herself should know at least one reason why he called her. Taking a seat at the chair opposite, Catwoman guessed the guy was wondering why she hadn't stolen anything. She does have a point. Honestly, Yuson has only two guesses as to why this happened. 1. Murney's completely lost her mind. 2. She has a terminal illness. However, the girl said that both of these guesses were wrong. What's more, is the young man not overstepping his boundaries towards her? Holy shit! When I think of you in the past, I even break out in a cold sweat at night. Weren't you the one who gambled during the war, stole the squad's capital, and then sneaked into the Lord's castle? Luke shouted at her in rage, swinging the book at her. Withdrawing her gaze, an awkwardly smiling Murney remembered it, and said it was like that. Well, if that's the case, what's become of her now? Han Yusong is sure that someone like this girl will never stop stealing. He's more likely to believe the words that Valian gave up on the woman. Since things worked out that way, the guy decided to make a deal with Murney. Later, if she gets in trouble, she can contact Yuson. But right now, Catwoman has to go. He will rent her a room in a hotel so that she can live there. He'll give her enough money. Isn't that a welcome offer for a vagabond like her? I will indeed keep my promise, Murney said in a shaky voice, and then tears ran down her cheeks. So please don't kick me out. Seeing this, Yuson looked at her dumbfounded. This girl, what's wrong with her? The war with the demon was over, and EI promised each of the warrior squad to fulfill their fondest wish. Murney's wish was for more money, more gold. Overnight, she became the richest man in the kingdom. She threw parties every day. She'd go to the casino, and the money would slip out of her hands like water. But even so, the mountain of gold could not be reduced. To be more precise, Murney believed it. One day, however, all her money suddenly ran out. She jumped at the gaming table again, spending even what she had borrowed. But the debt was only growing. And eventually, her old habit kicked in. In desperation, she touched the royal family's property. That's how Murney went from hero to criminal. After escaping the city, the girl had only one place left to go. This was her home village. Coming home after many years, Murney saw something terrible. The native village and all its inhabitants were burned before the girl's eyes. That's when the thief realized that all of this was because of her. If she hadn't contacted the royal family, none of this would have happened. In that moment, Murney remembered Luke's words to her the last time the girl stole in front of him. The boy had made a wish that day and traveled back to his world. Again, Murney. You think you deserve forgiveness no matter what you've done and can easily move on? I'm free now, and I won't be watching you. But the sins you've committed will come back to you someday. And it will happen with such force that you won't be able to handle it yourself. Murney, wise up! As soon as the girl remembered this, her hands shook. She screamed in despair, realizing that Luke was right, and now she was being punished for the sins she had committed. The entire village was burned to the ground, and not a single person survived. So you've developed tremors in your hands? Yuson clarified, looking at the crying girl. Murney confirmed this and told me that this happens when she approaches the casino. Everything starts spinning and nausea sets in. After listening to her, the guy immediately realized it was PTSD. After realizing the difficulty of this situation, Yuson found it hard to believe, but he still agreed to postpone his offer to move. After that, the young man waved his hand, letting the Catwoman go. The girl left the office, and the guy, left to himself, thought about something. No matter how much Murney touched the royal family's fortune, they were not only trying to kill members of the warrior order, but they were bringing in her tribe. The purpose of such a move is obvious. It's a ploy to lower the authority of the warrior squad and increase the power of the royal family, using Myrnie's actions as an excuse. Nerber is a tyrant and jealous king of Kingdom 1 who longs to be unconditionally always in first place. The goddess sitting on the phone remarked that she had never doubted Yusan's savvy. The boy immediately wondered why EI hadn't left that incapable child. If she had told her, she would have listened, right? Io told me that only a few people know this fact, but after she grants a wish, her power to influence the lower world is weakened for about 10 years. The goddess also wanted to discourage Myrnie. How could she commit such a sin just out of her own personal desire? Nerber, that sinner, along with his minions, will in the future, even in hell, suffer endless pain in the most merciless and terrible place. Luke explained, however, that no matter how hard one tried, the resentment of those people who had been sacrificed could not be assuaged. Io, in turn, said that she had already sent the souls of the dead people of the Myrnie tribe to the land of peace. Glancing at the phone, the guy said that the goddess and herself should know that Myrnie did it because of the king's greed. EE responded that she understands that. But with her crime, this girl gave the king an excuse and eventually lost her tribe. So she was never able to forgive herself. That's when Yusan realized why the goddess was so favorable to them. EE is very kind but so naive. The next day came, and from very early in the morning, Aram started sounding the alarm. Mr. Yusan, Leonard broke the doorknob. Sylvia had a seizure while watching TV. What should I do? And Valiant, Luxie, Alicia. Sitting in a chair in his office, a grizzled Yusan can't understand why there isn't a single normal person among them. Although, on the other hand, Myrnie, at least right now, is probably hosting her own fashion show. Finally despairing, the boy turned to Aram. Leaning back in his chair, the young man sighed and asked his secretary's opinion on what would be the best thing to do to teach people the rules of life in Korea if those people were from other countries and generally very different in culture and common sense. Do you have to do that? Clarified a perplexed Aram. With a puzzled look at him, Yusan asked what he meant. The secretary explained that, as far as he knew, there was an educational program for such foreign migrants. Wouldn't it be better to send them there? There's a class coming up in a week. Aram, the boy said, rising from his chair. This reaction has misled the artificial intelligence. You're just a genius! Shrieked the delighted Han Yusong, praising his secretary. Laughing, a beaming Aram asked if the boss had only now realized it. Soon, the entire warrior squad was sitting at their desks with the other regular students and listening to the teacher. It's good to see you all here. My name is Yoon Hyeon. I'll be your teacher, introduced the woman standing at the blackboard. I hope we can be friends. Suddenly, the phone rang. When Han Yusung accepted the incoming call, Yoon Hyeon's crying voice was heard on the other side of the conversation. She apologized to the guy and said that she couldn't take it anymore. After saying that, the woman dropped the call. Meanwhile, next to the young man, all the members of the warrior squad were sitting on their knees with their hands raised up. What the hell did you do that the teacher is crying? Luke asked with a surprised look at them. Moving closer to them, the boy asked Myrnie to explain herself first. However, to his surprise, the girl said that she listened well to the lectures. The problem arose because of Leon, the brainless jock, and the elf girl. Glaring at her indignantly, Alicia asked what the setup was. But turning away, Myrnie said it wasn't a setup, it was the truth. That's when the three of them felt Luke's depressing gaze on them. I'll give you 3 seconds. Tell me the whole truth, the guy said angrily, looking at them. A few hours ago, democracy? A country of the people, created by the people for the people. Is that really okay? Wouldn't it have been better to do the opposite? Leo asked, looking at the teacher puzzled. This stumped the teacher, but the boy didn't stop asking more questions. He explained that no matter what the system was, the holders of power could in one way or another pass on their power by inheritance. Don't people know about this? Trying to resist such an onslaught of questions, the instructor suggested taking the United States as an example. The United States is a country ruled by money. People with mighty financial power dominate the government and society. They also station their troops, expressing that it is for world peace. So isn't this a complete dictatorship? Leo inquired again, looking at the woman. Looking at this terrifying boy, Yun Hyeon began to mentally call out to the judge. She didn't even have time to say anything. The police? She is in the same position as the sentries. But isn't there a problem in selecting such people if there are differences between men and women? Valian asked, joining the discussion. The woman immediately explained that it was for gender equality. But the man replied that he wasn't asking about equality. He was wondering why the police weren't increasing their fighting power. A gun? The barbarian had heard that it was a weapon that couldn't be used carelessly because of the penalties. How can the police be called the protectors of the people if they have no weapons or combat power? Then what's the point of having them at all? Hyun's head snapped up and she started calling for the judge again. She didn't even say anything to him. Then, caught up in the teacher's words about gender equality, Alicia reminded us that racial discrimination is rampant in this world. From the oppression of black people to the mass murder of Jews. No one gives an answer as to why people with a different skin color but the same species are discriminated against and bullied. It is said that even here in Korea, people with white and black skin color are looked at with disgust. Can a teacher say with certainty that there is no discrimination? This reasoning finally killed Hyun, who was still in tears and couldn't get through to the judge. Punching Alicia in the head in rage, Luke yelled that it was her fault. She, being racist, is still talking about racial discrimination. What a load of crap. As the Elphys fell to the floor, the guy turned on the remaining two. Sitting on their knees with their hands up, Leo and Valiant awaited their punishment. Then the goddess on the phone asked the young man if it was the children who had made the mistake after all. Looking at them, Yusan realized that even though Alicia had said so, everyone else had asked the questions correctly. It's the instructor's fault that she failed to respond properly. A true teacher must answer even the most provocative questions fairly and impartially. The moment he fails to answer a question, he loses his qualification. In that case, Yusan has no choice but to teach them everything himself. Such an unexpected decision struck the IO hard. Okay, even though it's been a whole decade, nothing has changed. This guy still has the lowly heart of a hero. Approaching Luke from the back, the leader of the warrior squad addressed him. He had a question. Turning back to Leo, Yusan wondered what he wanted again. He was suddenly so serious. As we know in Midgard, the Fifth Kingdom has been regressing more and more. Over time, it has become even more noticeable. However, in this world, the opposite is true. Civilization only grows with time. Therefore, Leon was curious as to why there was such a difference between the two worlds. Yusan looked at him in surprise and asked the boy if he didn't know such elementary things. Leo didn't understand what Luke was talking about and asked for a quick answer. Yu Song, on the other hand, explained that there was only one difference between the kingdoms of Midgard and Korea. After that, the young man asked the squad leader if the people were paying attention to the government or not. Attention to power? That's right. Midgard rejects and hates everything new and common. Those who only care about themselves will eventually, slowly, and inevitably rot away. It's the other way around. As long as the public keeps an eye on everything, one person cannot monopolize everything. We can guarantee power and wealth only when we divide it fairly among people, even if it is done by force. That's why Midgard continues to stand in one place. If there was no goddess, the Fifth Kingdom would simply not be able to survive. Hearing this, the priestess remarked that these words could be issued as if the world was making mistakes because of the goddess. The girl then asked to be corrected if she was wrong. What? I didn't say it was the goddess's fault. The goddess does fulfill her duties, right? Yusong calmly muttered after looking at her. Looking at the young man perplexed, Sylvia asked what the matter was then. Luke's next words literally struck the priestess in the most painful place. He explained that it was the fault of the temple, which only pretended to be noble, but in reality interpreted its rotten dogmas in a shitty way. While the partners were trying to bring Sylvia out of her stupor, Yusan had already headed to his office with the words that the lesson was over for the day. After that, he asked the students to think carefully and left the living room. Going into his room, the boy closed the door behind him. Turning around, he noticed that the 6 of them were striking. The one who used to twirl her mace in different directions now sits silently. The abnormal pixie is quiet and can't adapt in any way. EI immediately wondered what the young man's initial thoughts were about them. Idiots who are worse than wild animals. Needless to say, they have now turned from dogs into humans. But nevertheless, they are still idiots. Yusan explained thoughtfully. The goddess concluded by noting that the grade is quite low. The time was nearing nightfall. Meanwhile, Luxie was sitting in Luke's office, reading some book with interest. Grabbing the girl by the scruff of the neck, Yusan demanded to get out of his room. When the boy asked the sorceress how long she was going to sit there, She replied that she would stay until she finished reading. With an irritated look at her, the guy offered the girl two options. Either she would leave on her own or kick her ass. Savage, Luxie said briefly, glancing at the young man. Okay, I'm going to give you a real beating, Luke said angrily, kneading his fists. But to his surprise, the sorceress took the book with her at the same moment and said meekly that she was leaving. The door closed, and Yusan only looked wistfully after Luxie. Lying in bed, Luxie had been unable to sleep for a rather obvious reason for quite some time now. The squad mates sleeping nearby were chattering in their sleep. The elfess, shouting with anger, scolded someone. Sylvia, lying on top of the sorceress, asked the goddess for forgiveness. Marnie, on the other hand, was just laughing and happy about her new clothes. Looking in front of her, the only thing Luxie thought about was that book. She really wanted to finish it. Luke's words in today's lesson were etched in her memory. Midgard rejects and hates everything new and common. Those who only care about themselves will eventually, slowly, and inevitably rot away. That's right. That's because the people of Midgard don't record anything in the records. They only pass on something as an inheritance, but they don't pass on knowledge. Therefore, this is where Luxie's wishes can come true. But the next morning, the girl saw a sign on the doorknob leading to Luke's room. It said no one was allowed to enter the office, and especially not Luxie. Are you asking me to open it for you? No, I can't. Go away, Yusan said, putting on his tie. Looking at him perplexed, the sorceress asked what the reason was. Turning around to the mirror, the guy explained that Luxie has a sickness that runs deep once she gains knowledge. A psychosis that wants to know the source by all means. But when the girl said she wasn't sick, the young man objected, further explaining that she was mentally ill. Under the pretext of finding a cure, Luxie anatomized over 100 people. It was only to satisfy her thirst for knowledge. However, the enchantress recalled that these people were actually consenting to treatment themselves. Luke objected in turn. They agreed only because of Luxie's threats. The girl then tried to justify herself by saying that these were unavoidable sacrifices. Huh? Victims? Luxie, we're talking about people, Yusan reminded, approaching the sorceress. You should at the very least feel remorse for these victims. But what did you say then? Luke walked into her lab that day, where the entire floor was already smeared in blood, and Luxie was waiting for him. The guy still remembers it. He can even repeat her words exactly. What luck, Luxie said frantically. It was more than effective. Yusan's hair stood on end at what she had done to those people. Even now, the girl probably wouldn't feel anything if hundreds or thousands of people died for her knowledge. Looking at the boy, Luxie said he had it all wrong. It was to save the city, not because of the girl's curiosity. At this point, Luke replied that once, no, not even twice, could be considered a mistake. However, from the third time, it's no longer a mistake, but malice aforethought. Waving it off, the guy asked the sorceress to stop making excuses. He didn't trust her. Yusan wouldn't even be surprised if, for the sake of experimentation, Luxie would ever kill tens of thousands of people. And so the young man demanded the girl get as far away from here as possible. Far enough away so that her crazy behavior wouldn't touch him in any way. No, Luxie said suddenly. I don't want to, I won't, I'm not leaving. Hearing this, Yusan yelled at the sorceress, ordering her to get out of here now. Sitting down in a chair, the exhausted guy spent some more time trying to figure out what was even going on. The goddess on the phone asked the child not to get so angry. Otherwise, his blood pressure would rise. An angry Yusan asked what she was even talking about. Moreover, he asked the Almighty not to read his mind. To this, EI explained that the young man sighed so much that it was hard not to guess what he was thinking. Reaching out for his phone, the guy wondered if he could turn the game off. He can't think while someone is watching him. But the concerned EI asked him not to do that. If the connection is cut, it will take a very long time to get from Midgard to this world. With a perplexed look at the goddess, Yusan asked why she was making such a fuss over something so insignificant. Io immediately asked the child to imagine what he would do if the download took 1 year. That's when the guy realized her fears. Anyway, Luke can't keep his phone on forever. What do we do in this case? The goddess revealed that the reason she can be linked to this world is because in the virtual game space, her followers worship her for something called finding a team. However, there are no believers in this world, and therefore EI cannot incarnate. Crazy, you don't lift a finger to live? So the players are believers? Yusan clarified, leaning on his fist. EI confirmed this, noting that the guy made her life a lot easier. Taking his gaze away, Luke wondered how he could make this goddess incarnate. After a while, Han Yu-song called Sylvia over to him and sat her down at the computer. The guy asked the girl to look at it and think about what could be done. Looking at him puzzled, the woman asked where the sacred power came from. Luke scratched the back of his head and said he didn't know, then told the priestess to look at the players acting as worshippers. Looking at the girl, the guy asked her if she thought there was any way. Even if Sylvia is crazy, she's still a saint, so she should be good at this. With an irritated sigh, the priestess suggested that Luke figure it out for himself instead of asking some crazy woman. So, you won't need IO's help in the future anymore? The boy suddenly inquired, pressing the woman in pain. Throwing a confident glance at Sylvia, Luke asked why she was trying to argue with him when she knew she was going to lose anyway. Gathering her thoughts, the girl realized that she needed to hold on. After all, if this guy refused to help, only the squad would regret it. When the priestess agreed to help, Yusan asked again what could be done about the situation. The woman replied that it was very difficult. Players believe in God only in the virtual world, and it is unlikely to affect reality. However, one could try to put the sacred power into something like a sacred object. The boy immediately guessed that by sacred object, Sylvia meant something like a cross. Luke immediately asked the girl if she had anything like that. The girl in turn told him that she really used to have crosses, but during the escape, she had sold most of them, so she didn't mind if the guy scolded her. But suddenly, Sylvia had a brilliant idea. The priestess looked at Luke and asked if he knew what idolatry was. That's when Yusan realized she was out of her mind. Holding the Artemis Chan figurine in his trembling hands, the guy with glasses tearfully says goodbye to his goddess. If it weren't for family circumstances, he would never have sold it in his life. Looking at the retard with shame, Han Yu-song offered to give him the figurine already. But the guy with glasses just turned away and tearfully asked him to give him some more time to part with it. Ah, how I hate this, Yusan thought, staring unhappily at the jerk. Soon the lad bought back the figure and, coming home, placed it on the table in front of Sylvia. As the girl began to consider Artemis-chan, Luke asked if she felt anything. With a glance at the guy, Sylvia narrated that there was much more sacred energy here. The former owner must have been a righteous believer. Idolization. As a simple example, you can look at the usual fans of the idols. In Midgard, the authority of the goddess could not be ignored, so if someone dared to worship another god, it was perceived as non-belief. The apostates were caught and gathered in the temple, and then ruthlessly punished. Why were they so oppressed? It's to steal divine power. All the stolen divine power is used to keep the bishops young. They torture other people to keep their filthy lives going. Sylvia didn't know this either until she became high priestess. Now the girl suggests that perhaps because of this, both she and these bishops will go to hell and burn in an eternal fire of terror. Looking at Sylvia without regret, the guy asked if she had only just figured it out. It turns out that it was really true, that those who said these bishops were normal were actually crazy. Closing her eyes, the girl realized that she shouldn't have told Luke that. After a while, the priestess finished moving the divine power into the pre-prepared figure. Looking at the figure in surprise, Yusan asked the girl if there was enough divine power for Io to be able to move in there. At the same moment, Sylvia's gaze became saddened and she replied that even all of this wasn't enough. Need about 3% more of the divine power that had already been poured into the vessel for goddess Io. Since Io needed a vessel, in that case, it would be good if she had a human form. That's why Han Yu-song thought of a figurine. If you think about it that way, taking the divine power from figurines bought from otaku and then putting it into Io's carrier was a brilliant idea. This is, contrary to expectations, pious navel-gazing on the part of fans. While a frustrated Sylvia was wondering what she should do next, Io, who was on the phone, laughed contentedly and said that even if everything wasn't perfect, this divine power was enough to establish a connection between her and the real world. The goddess then offered to try it once and, stepping off the phone, channeled her energy into a nearby vessel. Standing in front of the table, Luke and Sylvia watched as Io tried to omnitize the figure. But it had been quite some time. But the goddess could not get into the vessel prepared especially for her. Looking puzzled at this, Luke asked the priestess if it hadn't worked out. But the girl objected, noting that the goddess had managed to omnipresent herself in the figure after all. On top of that, the divinity within the host began to increase dramatically. Meanwhile, the rest of the warrior squad ran into the living room and also began to watch the miracle in progress. Suddenly, the figure stirred, dumbfounding everyone in the room. The goddess actually succeeded in moving into this world and inhabiting a physical body. And while Han Yusan watched with embarrassment as his former comrades crowded admiringly around Io's figure, Aram remarked that what was happening was very much like an otaku gathering. Looking at her hands in surprise, Io said that she never knew it would be like this. She never would have thought that the prayers of the virtual world believers would be so powerful. It's so great to go beyond the divine being and reincarnate into a body. However, Luke interrupted the goddess's cheering, objecting that he thought it was worse than nothing. The guy immediately asked if it wasn't strange that the doll came to life and moved on its own. After all, in that case, when other people see Io's body, there will be quite a few unnecessary questions. Looking at the awkwardly turned away goddess, Luke wondered if there was any other way to reincarnate. Well, since I'm already out of heaven, I don't think I'll be able to get out of this body for at least another 20 years, Io awkwardly explained, shamefully averting her gaze. Feeling the guy's disdainful gaze on her, she immediately started apologizing to him and asking him not to look at her in such a scary way. At the same second, Sylvia popped up in front of Luke's face and promised to take care of the goddess's reincarnation, then asked the guy to temper his anger. Why the fuck did you interfere? Yusan suddenly uttered, looking at the kneeling priestess in front of him with her news. The girl in turn apologized to the guy, but said she couldn't give in to him anyway. Sylvia, are you out of your damn mind? Hearing that, the girl instantly felt Luke's terrifying aura. It was then that she realized that the first time they met in this world, he hadn't shown his full power. Leaning over, the guy grabbed Sylvia's shoulder firmly and explained that just because they'd been living quietly for the past few days didn't mean their relationship had gotten better. Don't pretend. Are you acting remorseful? You're still a rotten piece of scum to me. So don't pretend to be disgustingly kind to me. After saying that, Luke nonchalantly let go of the girl's shoulder and turned around and headed for his office. That's right, they still have a bad relationship, and Sylvia still hasn't even apologized. But even so, is it okay to hurt her heart to that extent? When Luke returned to his room, Io came in after him. He looked at her and asked why she hadn't stayed to comfort her daughter. The goddess explained that sometimes relief can be achieved when no one comforts you. Sylvia would overcome that on her own. However, lowering her concerned gaze, Io noticed that Luke looked very sad. In response, Yusan only turned away, continuing to stand still. Walking over to her child, the goddess tugged at his pant leg and asked him not to hurt himself. She worried that the boy would keep hurting himself and his scar would only deepen. Well, seriously, I made her a figurine for nothing, Yusan thought with annoyance as he closed his eyes. Sometime later, Han Yusan's house. Determined to calm down a bit, Luke headed to the gym and started doing barbell exercises. Right during another approach, Valian walked into the gym and said he was just looking for Luke. When he put the bar back in place, a sweating Yusan looked at the man and asked what he wanted. The barbarian explained that he had asked Aram where Luke was, and he had directed him here. I want to go outside for a while, Valian said suddenly, glancing at the boy. He then explained that he briefly wanted to go outside because being inside all the time depressed him. Hearing this, Han Yusong looked at the man in surprise. Noticing Luke's strange look on his face, Valian turned away and said that if the guy wouldn't let him, he wouldn't mind and continue to stay home. But contrary to his expectations, Luke didn't forbid it and said that he thought it would be okay. The guy would give the man a watch, and so he should definitely wear it. After that, Yusan asked the barbarian not to go too far away and not to cause problems. When Valian asked if Luke would really let him go out, the guy reminded him that he wasn't their babysitter. In any case, when the training was over, the entire warrior squad would be gone. Thanking Luke, Valian walked out of the gym, leaving the boy to himself. At the same moment, Yusan, startled, noticed Io standing nearby. The goddess remarked that it was rather unexpected that he had allowed the barbarian to leave the house. The guy, on the other hand, explained that in any case, whether they liked it or not, they would have to live in this world. So they'd better adapt quickly. And the best way to adapt is to see the world for themselves. It's better to experience it once than to hear it explained 10 times. Apparently, that's what Han Yusong meant. Seeing Valian already dressed in his outer clothes, a surprised Mirni asked if he was already leaving. Looking at her perplexed, the barbarian asked what she was talking about. He would just step out for a while to survey the area. Standing next to his partner, Leon asked if he could come out too. Listen up. Luke's voice suddenly sounded as the door to his room opened. If you go out together and suddenly get in a jam, well, you know what happens. Hearing this, Valian and Leo only looked at the guy tensely. Holding out a smartwatch to the two men, Yusan asked them to put this on. Aram would help them with everything. Aram himself remarked that it was the same as going on a date with him. Taking this smartwatch in his hand, Valian asked why he needed two pieces at once. Pointing his finger at the squad leader, Luke explained that if the barbarian went alone, there would only be trouble. Therefore, Leon should go as well. From now on, if anyone wanted to go out, they would do it in groups of at least two. And when Leo asked why he was the one who had to go with Valian, Yusan wondered if he was suggesting that someone else go. If that idiot got mad, only the squad leader would be able to stop him. Agreeing with his words, the golden-haired guy still took the smartwatch and put it on his wrist. Wishing them a good walk, Luke advised the boys to just call Aram if something came up that they wouldn't know. Saying that, he walked out of the house and headed for the parking lot. Then, looking at his partner, Leo asked where exactly he wanted to go. The barbarian said he wanted to go to the most powerful country in the world, the United States of America. Looking at her children, the goddess wondered if they would be okay. Isn't it dangerous to let the two of them go? Meanwhile, while heading towards his car, Han Yusong was also thinking about this matter. For some reason, he became anxious that these idiots would make a mess of things. But anyway, if something goes wrong, it won't be his fault or Io's fault, probably. Approaching Valian, Sylvia seriously asked if he understood everything. In no way should he use violence, attack someone, or cause trouble. Looking puzzled at the girl, Varvara asked what he should do if he was attacked. In response, the priestess advised him to just run away. But the man did not agree with her point of view and tried to convince her that warriors do not run away. To his dismay, however, Sylvia remembered how Valian had then been the fastest to run away when the guards wanted to capture them. When the man agreed to do nothing of the sort, the girl approached Leon and earnestly asked him not to meddle in other people's affairs. But Mirny had had enough of this idle chatter, and asking Sylvia to stop moralizing, the girl sent the two out of the door of the flat. Soon Valian and Leo found themselves outside. Looking surprised at the front door of the house, the barbarian remarked that he was beginning to think that he and the leader wouldn't be able to get out. Leon in turn reminded him that they were no longer children. Aram, however, explained to them that even children worry less, and so they should listen to what he says next. There are even more problems and worries from adults who don't listen to anyone than from children. With a frustrated sigh, Leon asked if Luke was overstepping his bounds by restricting their movement. Valian, thinking over Aram's words, noted that he was certainly the most obedient of the group. Following them, the elf wondered if the two of them were really going to discuss this. In her opinion, what Luke had done to Sylvia was far worse. The squad leader nodded, but reminded her that Alicia wasn't the one to judge. But it wasn't until Leo said it that the two realized who was walking beside them. The dazed barbarian asked Alicia what she was doing here, to which she reminded him that she had excellent stealth skills. She was just following them and eavesdropping on the conversation. With a startled look at her, the golden-haired boy asked if the girl was going to tell Luke everything they had just talked about. Then, turning nervously on him, the elf reminded herself of Luke's recent words that it was now okay to go out in groups of at least two. That means Alicia can join them too, doesn't it? Hearing this, Leon shrieked that these were just excuses. But Valian, standing beside him, asked him to calm down, reminding him that Alicia was one of the best warriors and her survival skills were top-notch. It was unlikely that she had come out with any malicious intent. Laughing contentedly, the elfess remarked that Valian was speaking quite reasonably for an ignorant barbarian. Looking at her shamefully, the man added that although she was good at survival, this girl had some character issues, and while the two continued their squabble, Leon, who had moved a little farther away, noticed something unusual. Not far from them, an old lady was walking down the sidewalk, and the moment she stepped out onto the roadway, a speeding car pulled out of nowhere in front of her. The driver of the vehicle, of course, immediately tried to brake, but it was too late. Just noticing this, Leon snapped out of his seat at the same instant, rushing to the elderly lady's aid. In a second, he reached the old woman. The guy made a sharp lunge and literally snatched her from under the wheels of the car. "Oh my goodness, thank you, foreign bachelor! Thank you!" said the old lady in tears, looking into the surprised face of her savior. And while Leo was trying to figure out what a bachelor was, a crowd of people had already begun to gather at the scene. Noticing that the car had broken the guardrail, gawkers started calling 119 while discussing how this foreigner had saved the grandmother. Kneeling down in front of the guy, the old lady uttered that she would have been in great trouble if he had not come to her aid in time of need. After these words, she took out some money from some envelope and asked her savior to accept it as a reward. Awkwardly saying that he didn't need a reward, Leo began to look around, hoping to find his comrades who had only recently stood in the crowd of gawkers. But to his surprise, there was no sign of them. "Valiant! Alicia, where are you? Help!" came a desperate cry as the two tensely hid behind the wall. A while later, somewhere near the center of town, as he followed the gloomy Leon, Valian reminded him that Sylvia had recently told him not to meddle in the affairs of others. Had he already forgotten? The elven woman walking beside him remarked that the guy definitely had more brains than muscles in this barbarian. Since he was able to cover such a huge distance in just a couple of seconds, the leader of the squad reminded him that he has a pretty good reaction time, thanks to which he managed to save that old lady's life. That's a pretty big deed, and more importantly, the guy was rewarded with money. Looking at the envelope of bills in Leon's hands in surprise, Valian agreed that it had indeed worked. And when an indignant Alicia decided to argue with him again, Leo interrupted her, promising to buy her ice cream with the money. "How about we go to that place that sells the 31st flavor?" Alicia, who had grabbed the envelope, suddenly suggested admiringly, changing her mood abruptly. A few minutes later, the pixie was already enjoying another ice cream cone. While she was marveling at how delicious it was, Valian looked at her dumbfounded and asked how much more she was going to eat. This was her 5th ice cream. With a scornful glance at him, Alicia told him to shut up, because ice cream doesn't gain weight anyway. "That's right. Ice cream can't gain weight, and you will," the barbarian replied, making the girl angry again. And while the pissed-off elven woman was hanging onto an indifferent villain, Leo awkwardly drew their attention to something odd. The golden-haired boy noticed that for some reason everyone around them was suddenly fidgeting. Aram explained that it was because the three of them stood out. They had a rather unique appearance for this country. Grinning, Alicia exhaled in relief and said that she knew full well she was a hottie. Meanwhile, completely ignoring the elfess, behind her back people started crowding around Valian and asking for a picture with him. And while the barbarian marveled at this beautiful world, people crowded around him wondering how he was able to pump such incredible muscles and how old he was. Alicia asked him why he was suddenly as affectionate as a rabbit when she saw him chatting sweetly with his admirers. Well, sooner or later, he'd have to make a below-the-belt joke, and the man would get a good smack on his satisfied face for it. "Isn't that right, Leo?" the elfess uttered, glancing hopefully at the squad leader. But he was already surrounded by a crowd of admirers, asking if he was an actor. Or maybe a model. However, even when Leo answered that he was nothing of the sort, the girls were still sure that he was some kind of celebrity. Looking at the guy with disdain, Alicia certainly couldn't expect him to act like a rabbit either. After a while, the three of them still managed to break away from the crowd of fans and seclude themselves in one of the courtyards of the city. With a puzzled look at Aram, the elf wondered if the people of this world were always so clingy. The secretary replied that it wasn't quite so, but they must have behaved that way only because those three were really attractive and cool. Smiling contentedly, Alicia observed that despite being self-centered, Aram had a much better way of saying nice things than hypocritical people. And when Aram thanked her and corrected her that he was not an egoist but an artificial intelligence, Leon looked at the girl thoughtfully. "Alicia, like I said before, not all people are what you think they are." The boy tried to change her mind, glancing worriedly at the elfess. To this, the girl only grinned and said that she would answer him as she had before. She doesn't think all people are like that either. However, there's a pretty big nuance. Not 1 among 10, and not even 1 among hundreds. Only 1 in 1,000 is a real person. As you can understand, that percentage is incredibly small. Plus, there's one intractable problem with this. It is almost impossible to identify such a real person. Sitting on the bench across from him, Valian observed that, after all, Alicia hadn't changed at all since those days. Then, clenching her fist, the girl asked if her anger wasn't appropriate. Barbara in turn agreed with her, but from what she said, it could be said that the deaths of innocent people were appropriate as well. Is the death of not only people who had nothing to do with what happened, but also those who tried to save the elves appropriate? Some elves killed people even for eating talking to them. Is that really appropriate as well? And while Alicia was trying to come up with an excuse, Valian stood up from the bench, saying that he didn't understand why the girl always said she despised people. No matter how much time passes, she won't admit guilt. Alicia doesn't even try to contemplate it, which only means that she is no different from those she despises so much. After hearing this unpleasant truth about herself, the elfess also stood up from the bench and looked the barbarian angrily in the face. The air was immediately silent and tense. The two men seemed to be at each other's throats, but the moment Alicia snapped out of her seat to try to hit Valian, she was stopped by Aram. "You two can fight, but I think it would be best to stop Leon first, right?" the secretary suggested. Hearing this, the barbarian and the elven woman looked dumbfounded at the spot where their squad leader had recently sat. But there's no sign of the guy. Where the hell's the brainiac gone? "You guys! Crowd mocking the weak and still calling yourselves men?" Leon's angry shout came from somewhere nearby. Turning around, Valian and Alicia saw the golden-haired guy punching some bully with great force. Looking at this, the barbarian and the elven woman standing next to him fell into a stupor and realized what a mess they were in. Behind the angry Leon, they noticed some boy sitting on his knees in tears. This kid with glasses was badly beaten up, and apparently he was the one Leo was defending. Among the 10 commandments of a knight, the most paramount are considered to be to act bravely, to do good deeds, and to become a fighter of good against evil. Leon was an example, always following the above 3 principles. And to keep his promise to the woman he had loved in the past, he firmly believed that his life was not wrong. So even now, Leo thinks he did the right thing by punching that guy. With an irritated glance at the golden-haired boy, Valian asked why they are in a cell if he did everything right. The world really is a cruel place. Alicia agreed with the barbarian for once, sarcastically noting that it was an admirable start to run into government agencies on their first foray. And yet, even though he was unshakably sure that he was right, Leon had a sense of conscience, and so he had the courage to apologize to his comrades for the mishap. At the time of the incident, there was a girl standing near the scene who wanted to film the bullying. But in the end, the footage showed Leon lecturing the bullies. However, the attackers did not listen to him and only mocked the guy. And when the 3 pounced on Leon, the girl shouted happily for them to show the underdog the proper way. Laughing, she continued looking at her phone while asking her friends how much longer she had to film all of this. But as she looked up, she noticed something terrible. Running up to Leon, who had beaten up the bullies, the elf started pulling the boys away from him, and Valian, sitting down on his knee, told one of them not to tell anyone about what had happened today. But when he saw a girl standing nearby with a cell phone, the barbarian approached her and poked his finger at the camera in surprise, asking what the hell it was. This video was replayed over and over again by 2 investigators at the police station to understand exactly what happened. "I see," the man said thoughtfully, watching the video to the end. Afterward, he turned his gaze thoughtfully to the front desk of the police station. There were several moms and dads standing there, outraged that their children had been beaten by some foreigners. With a tense sigh, one of the investigators could not believe for some time that these foreigners had really beaten the minors so brutally. Upon hearing this, Leon asked in surprise what the big deal was about them beating up minors. Valian shared his bewilderment and asked Aram what absurdity this was. When minors do such things, shouldn't they be punished? What if they had killed that boy? In response, the secretary explained that they don't do that in South Korea. Even more confused, Valian said that if they, the barbarians, committed a crime, they would all be punished regardless of their age. So why don't people follow common sense in this much more advanced world? Aram in turn replied that he didn't know that for sure, but perhaps it was because the country was full of fools. As they chatted with each other, Alicia, sitting next to them, looked thoughtfully at what was going on outside the prison cell. There was a woman standing there looking at the 3 foreign prisoners. When she saw the golden-haired elf looking at her, the woman made an angry face, showing the girl her disapproval of her. "Where are your fucking eyes looking?" Alicia whispered in fury, glaring back at her eerily. From such a terrifying aura, the woman immediately fainted. Noticing this, a concerned Leon asked his partner to stop it. After all, if she continued, they wouldn't get into trouble. Alicia waved the boy away carelessly, but he wasn't the one who should be saying that. The elf reminded Leo that the boy he had saved had ended up just saying he didn't know anything. She then asked the boy if he had forgotten about her power. Leon explained that if Alicia had used her power, it would have been harder to deal with that kid. Better a fist than divine power. Plus, the golden-haired guy's implication was that it was a shame that they had to go back to that power here too. Meanwhile, Aram interrupted their conversation, warning them that now was not the best time to think about it. "Where are they?" Luke's voice suddenly sounded angry. Judging from that shout, Mr. Yusong is very angry. Where are those bastards who can't even make money to feed themselves? I'm asking where they are, Han Yu-song shouted as he abruptly swung open the front door of the police station. The investigator looked irritably at the strange guy sitting across from him and tried to figure out who he was. He just barged in here and didn't even introduce himself. But judging by his behavior, he has something to do with these three foreigners. The investigator looked thoughtfully at the boy's face and asked him if he was the guardian of these foreigners. But anyway, he immediately asked him to sit still, because this was a police station, not a public park. However, when Yusan said that he knew that very well and asked him to tell what had happened, the policeman gave him another irritated look. "You're not going to tell?" the guy inquired, strangely averting his gaze. "As we told you on the phone recently, these foreigners abused children who were immediately admitted to the intensive care unit. The evidence is clear, so there's no escaping punishment," the investigator tensely explained, closing his eyes. Moreover, the man applied for refugee status verification, and apparently these three are in the country illegally, and so the likelihood of stiffer penalties is pretty high. After hearing this, Yusan realized that at this rate, this situation would turn into a complete mess. When the policeman confirmed this, the boy sat back in his chair and thought for a moment. Seeing this, the investigator was already glad that this dude finally realized the whole situation. But just thinking about it, the man noticed something strange. What the fuck is going on? Is he having fun right now? Ignoring the policeman's puzzled face, Yusan realized that this situation was extremely advantageous to him. Now he could get rid of those bastards legally. But at that moment, he heard Io's excited voice. It's a good thing for the guy that the goddess can't read minds, because her divine power has been transferred into a figurine. But her ability to telepathize is more burdensome. Turning away, Yusan asked Io to stop talking to him, then promised to work things out. Pleased by such words, the goddess in turn agreed, saying that she had faith in him. Meanwhile, while Yusan was trying to figure out why Io had such a crying voice, some man came up to him and asked the guy if he was the guardian of these foreigners. "Yes, so?" Han Yu-song inquired, turning around on him. "So what? What kind of people are so unscrupulous? Didn't you hear from the detective what they did to our children?" the fat man asked indignantly, looking at the boy unhappily. Scratching his ear, Yusan just looked away and said that he had heard that very well. Then he added that those guys had gotten what they deserved. And while his parents didn't understand what he was talking about, the boy rose to his feet and asked what he was wrong about. It was their children who started it. It was their children who attacked in droves without thinking of the consequences. And this result is a consequence of parents raising their children as gods. Hearing this, the fatty became even more angry. "You bloody bastard! Even if you apologize, I won't accept it! How dare you defy someone older than you brat! How did your parents raise you?" the man shouted in anger, pointing his finger at Yusan. Looking at him calmly, the boy said that his parents had raised him well. Fortunately, he hadn't grown up as crazy as the children of those people, and his parents weren't scumbags like that fat Mr. Fatty. Lucky. Unable to endure such passive aggression in his address, the man immediately attacked the guy with shouts. Yusan, for his part, stepped aside only slightly, causing his opponent to fly past him and hit a chair and fall to the floor. Helping the angry fat man to his feet, the investigator asked the guardian to calm down a bit. Spreading his hands, Yusan looked perplexedly at the detective and remarked that he hadn't moved his hands either. This gentleman, like his own child, had attacked first, and so the policeman could not criticize only the guy. "I'm calm, but I'm a little annoyed that they're treating them like criminals. Let's look at the facts. Children follow their parents. Isn't it a fact that he jumped me first now? Are you telling me to be cool about it? You continue to consider my wards criminals, and so I'm going to have to say the opposite. Isn't it really those bully bastards' fault?" After listening to this long speech of Yusan's, the detective only lowered his gaze, unable to answer anything. However, even after such a convincing monologue, the mother of one of the hooligans indignantly cried out that the boy had no right to say such words. "The kids are hurt! Children!" The other parents immediately joined in, explaining that children grow up fighting among themselves. In their opinion, this is normal, but when adults hit children, it is a crime. Then, interrupting their indignation, Yusan mouthed that these children would be adults in 2 years. When the boy said this, all the parents immediately stopped talking and looked at him tensely. That's right. The problem is that they're juveniles now. If they weren't minors, they would have been punished properly. Han Yu-song explained with a sly smile. Not understanding what he was talking about, one of the moms asked him what he was getting at. With a satisfied look at her, The guy asked the woman to think about what their children's lives would be like if he dragged this out for 2 years. Holding his aching shoulder, the angry fat man asked the kid if he was making threats. But to his regret, Yuson had no intention of making threats. He was simply stating his position. "This is making me laugh. Do I countersue? I'm not kidding," the boy said, turning to look at the tense man. "I'm sure I can keep the trial going for 2 years. I could do 10 years. I will destroy everything from your children's entry into college to their expulsion. Plus, school violence is a hot topic these days. What am I supposed to do? Are you sure you're sure of yourselves and the innocence of your precious children?" While Yuson was saying this, all the parents inside the police station looked at him with hatred. Noticing this, the guy clapped his hands and asked only those willing to fight dirty to stay. "I'm serious," he added, looking around contentedly at all his opponents. In the evening of the same day, Sylvia's outcry was heard at Han Yusong's house. She can't believe Leon didn't listen to her instructions before he left. She had clearly told him not to meddle in the affairs of others. Not even half a day later, they had already done something wrong. Glancing angrily at Valian, the priestess said that it concerned him too. He had to stop Leon. The barbarian only apologized to Sylvia, confessing that he had nothing to say for himself. He'd lost his guard because of the girl, so he hadn't been able to follow Leon. Meanwhile, standing nearby, Murney reminded her that everyone thought as if she was the one who would cause the big trouble. And from that moment on, Luke had cut his entire squad's expenses by 50%. Now, apparently, food delivery was out of the question. Alicia, unable to stand the taunts, walked over to Murney and promised that she would get what she deserved if she kept talking. The Catwoman laughed even more in response. At the same second, there was the sound of a fist smashing the table. Forgetting their quarrel, Murney and Alicia looked at the angry Luke. "Ah, never mind, you can go ahead. However, if you break something, you'll have to work to repair the damage, you know?" The guy explained to them, smiling sweetly. In response, the girls only looked at him unhappily and sighed. But when Luke suggested they continue, the two hypocritically smiled at each other and shook hands, deciding to end the argument. Valian came up to Yuson and looked at him gravely. "What are you staring at? Do you want to die?" the guy asked, making a creepy face. The barbarian, in turn, continued to stare at Luke, perplexed. Then he looked away oddly, turned around, and walked away. A few days later, "That's why you shouldn't be nice to people like that," Han Yusong muttered, tapping his finger on the table. "These claimants are too greedy. Apart from the hospital bills, they have even put up the amount of the settlement. And if Yuson had any time to spare, he'd deal with it properly. But what's at stake is the outcome of their asylum application. So the guy can't keep being called the bastard's guardian forever." Then, coming out of his office, the lad decided to address Myrni and Alicia. Hearing this, the Catwoman sitting on the couch asked what he needed. "What? He didn't say put your hands down yet," the chastened elfess asked tensely, holding her hands above her head. Allowing her to finally lower her hands, Luke motioned for the two to come over to him. "I need you for one thing," the guy said, looking at them. Then he promised to buy Myrni anything she wanted, and to restore Alicia's allowance if they did well. After hearing his suggestion, the girls looked among themselves. Looking at Luke, the dumbfounded Catwoman and Elfwoman asked if he was asking for their help. Seeing their frightened faces, the guy asked the girls not to look at him like he was dying. Scratching the back of his head, Yuson wondered if it was really that surprising. He just wants to use them for what they need. Besides, you need to be held accountable for your actions. How long am I going to have to clean up shit after you sons of bitches?" Luke yelled in rage, grabbing them firmly by the ears. That was when the group of fallen warriors were relieved to hear Yuson scolding, Myrni and Alicia. Between two women who are complete opposites in their personalities, tastes, and inclinations, there is a relationship that goes beyond enmity. They boast the best in terms of compatibility and combining their abilities. Alicia, who has the ability to block even the most advanced invisible devices, and Myrni, who has natural-born acting, sleight of hand, and a host of other skills. If you combine the abilities and talents of both of them, a spy scout with a crazy combination would be possible. And now this spy couple is coming in handy again in the 21st century. Alicia handed the tablet to Luke and told him that they had secretly gotten information about the bastards who were targeting the warrior squad. It was not difficult for the girls to find out what could be the main weakness of those people. Taking the clipboard in his hand, Yuson was surprised to note that, for what it was worth, the girls had done it in only half a day. Aram, on the other hand, explained that he too had done a good job. It was indeed much easier to get this information with artificial intelligence. As he leafed through all the documents he had obtained, the boy noticed that everything was as he had expected it to be. That fat bastard who tried to attack Yusan at the police station is corrupt. He even gave money to the school principal, and this woman was a tax evader. They say that by looking at the children, you can find out what the parents are like. It's exactly as Yusan thought it would be. The real problem really lies in the parents of these scum. 3 days later, the parents, who did not want to compromise, took the statement themselves without explaining anything to the investigators. In the end, the incident ended unreservedly and peacefully. Han Yusong summoned the 3 people responsible for the ambiguous situation and asked them what they had learned from the incident. And while they stared at him in bewilderment, the boy asked the 3 of them, puzzled, if they hadn't realized anything, even after such a valuable experience. Maybe they'd turned into perverts over the past 10 years and were getting scolded on purpose. Leon replied that Luke had misunderstood. In fact, the golden-haired guy realized that he had acted unwisely. Even though this world is many times more progressive than Midgard, Leo thought there was no difference between the law and the people, except for the caste system. But now, on the contrary, he thinks it's even worse. Leon's grandfather once said, "Laws are made by people, but people should never be above the law." But there seem to be a lot of people in this country trying to be above the law. Democracy is a good system, but the guy got the feeling that it was the reason the problems were only piling up. After listening to him, Han Yusong looked at the barbarian standing next to him. Valiant said that there was one absurd thing he had realized. In this world, unlike Midgard, the criterion of strength is money and power. He had no idea that such things were absolute. Only in this world is it a way of fighting. That's exactly what the barbarian realized. But even so, a man is not going to follow such ways. When it was Alicia's turn, she observed that people are, after all, still people. At best they help, but they know no mercy or gratitude. And yet there are some differences in this world. As the pixie was walking through the center of town, a small boy ran up to her and held out a beautiful flower. The surprised girl, of course, accepted this unexpected gift. "The people here are nastier than in Midgard," Alicia said suddenly, remembering that boy's smile. "No, it's better to say I hate them." After listening to everyone to the end, Han Yusong stood up from the table and remarked that the last statement wasn't very good. The boy looked at his former squad mates and suggested that this was the end of their conversation. Luke concluded by asking them to be mindful of the feelings they were experiencing as they did so. As unreasonable, dirty, and obscene as it may be, the world the warrior squad will have to adapt to is a place that cannot be changed. A few hours later, when Yusan was alone in his office, Sylvia came to see him. Turning to Mr. Luke, the priestess said she was interested in something. Closing the book, the guy explained that there were many interesting things in this world, after which he asked the girl what exactly she had come for. Sylvia immediately reminded Luke that, after all, Leon had violated his instructions. She was curious why the boy had let him go without saying anything. Looking thoughtfully at the girl, Yusan asked what he was supposed to say. Then, averting his gaze, he tisked unhappily. "Like the bastards just said, there really is a lot of irrationality in this world. It's so irrational that the perpetrator lives a happy life when the victim struggles with their past traumas. It's so disgusting. If you make others miserable, it is natural that you will have to pay for your sins. The same goes for those scum." Looking hopefully at Luke, the priestess wondered if that meant what she thought it meant. The guy immediately confirmed it. Yusan really hates Leon. He's a goddamn bastard. But this time, Yusan feels like this guy did the right thing by intervening in this situation. After all, he still deserves the gratitude of the man he stood up for. Leon saved this boy, and the boy, having overcome his fear, dared, even if not in person, to thank his savior sincerely. Leo really did the right thing, even though Han Yusong doesn't want to admit it. A few days later, Han Yusan's house. Walking into the living room, Yusan saw 3 of the warrior squad studying diligently while sitting at their textbooks. After that situation, Leon suddenly started learning Hangul. Sylvia is already well into her high school program, but Luxie has surpassed even them. She's already at the entrance stage of a prestigious university. They say this girl really has amazing knowledge, and Yusan had a clear head in his day and barely passed his qualifying exam. It's a goddamn unfair world. While the guy was trying to accept the fact that this wench was superior to him in every way, Mirny suddenly popped out of one of the rooms with another request. "Please invest in me a little," Catwoman suddenly said, pointing her finger confidently at herself. Looking at her, Yusan asked the girl if she had any bail. Hearing this, Mirny wondered what she could leave as collateral to get some money. But at the same moment, a sly smile appeared on her thoughtful face. I could give you my body, Murney offered, striking a sweet pose. However, seeing Luke's look of disgust, the girl asked perplexedly what had happened to his face. 3 days later, Murney left home. Child, you must find her now! How will this child survive in such a cruel world alone? Io cried out in tears as she looked at Luke. The goddess explained that, although Luke and the girl had had a bad relationship in the past, it had nothing to do with that. She asked him again to find Murney and bring her here. He looked at Io and told her that the Catwoman had left on her own. Meanwhile, Murney was already surrounded by crowds of fans and employers. Everyone admired her incredible looks and charm. They immediately started suggesting that the girl try her hand at the big stage once. Of course, Murney could not pass by such tempting offers and immediately agreed. At the same moment, she felt the angry looks of the other girls wanting the same job. However, Catwoman was only annoyed by this. Reality isn't fair, is it? Murney muttered with a mocking smirk as she looked at the two girls. Soon the video of this phrase hit the internet and very quickly became viral there. After watching this clip, Yusan remarked that this girl was really good. Aram in turn agreed with him, after which he expressed concern about it. After all, some accident could quietly happen because of envy. Yusan immediately reassured his secretary, explaining that even if something happened, Murney would not be harmed. On the contrary, those who decided to harm her would be harmed. Aram then tried to explain to Mr. Yusan that this was the main problem. But getting angry, the boy asked the secretary to forget about it. There was one less person in the group of warriors, so it was worth accepting it. After listening to Yusan, Aram told him that for a long time he could not understand why his master was in such a magnanimous mood. Turns out that's exactly what he wanted. Smiling contentedly, the guy set the mug of coffee on the table and asked his secretary when Murney would make her debut. Not wanting to keep his host waiting, Aram began to narrate. As everyone knows, the academy Miss Murney attends has an agreement with several agencies. They hold an event every year to showcase talented and attractive candidates. As he sipped his coffee, Yusan remarked that it was like arranging a matchmaking party. And from the looks of it, Murney had a good chance. Aram immediately confirmed this, explaining that to be chosen as a candidate is as difficult as getting a star from the sky. But as soon as Murney joined them, she immediately took the spot. Life really is so damn unfair. But despite the fact that it all looked like a fairy tale, Aram had another rather weighty apprehension. Rumor has it that there are illegal sponsors among the agencies that negotiated. In addition, there are rumors that many trainees have gone missing, and as soon as Aram told his master about it, Yusan's face suddenly darkened. Freezing in place, the boy turned around apprehensively to confirm his hunch. As expected, a tearful Io was already behind him, asking her child what Aram was now talking about. Illegal sponsorship? This can't be allowed! Screamed the goddess in despair as Yusan carried her somewhere, grabbing her by the scruff of the neck. In Midgard, it doesn't matter how talented or capable you are. Many people died of hunger or cold. In a world that was hard to live in because of differences in social status, Murney was one of those people too, until she met an old thief. But right now, conditions are much better here than in Midgard. Some say it's hell here, but it doesn't come close to what Murney experienced in Midgard. Of course, this girl isn't a genius like Luxie. Besides, she's not the type to put herself out there like Leon and Sylvia. Murney's not as savvy as Alicia, and she's not as strong physically as Valian. That said, unlike them all, this girl is good at acting and trickery. And that's when something interesting caught Murney's eye. She saw one influencer's private broadcast, after which she realized that this was her chance. A while later, Modeling Academy, Murney walks down the hallway and eats fresh salad with a fork. At that moment, she heard someone's envious voices nearby. Looking at her, the two girls were discussing among themselves how things had changed because of Murney's appearance. Hearing this, Catwoman raised her fork and trembled with excitement. As she looked mockingly at the two girls, Murney realized that envy was the same in all worlds. Meanwhile, Valian was watching her from afar. The barbarian looked at the girl and realized once again how lousy her temper was. Valian only got into the modeling academy with Murney at the behest of the goddess. Thinking about it, the man walked further down the corridor and into the dressing room. "Come to your senses, quickly!" suddenly yelled some woman with glasses. "Think of the money I've invested in you, bitches! If you fall, you're dead!" Valian leaned against the wall as he listened to the shouts and watched. In the same second, that door he had recently entered opened again. Upon entering the dressing room, a guy in a cap announced that the model in the city shoot was starting, then asked everyone to get ready as soon as possible. While the guy was shouting this, Valian, who was still observing the situation, noticed a large professional camera. Oh, so this is the kind of thing that filming is done with? At the same instant, the barbarian turned his attention to the girl sitting nearby. Her appearance and manners were different from those of other people. It was as if Valian had seen a modern aristocrat. But just as the man was contemplating this, the door opened again, and another stranger entered the dressing room. And what Valian sensed from this man threw him into a stupor. The glasses-wearing stranger walked past with a sinister smile on his face, ignoring the shocked barbarian. Already on the set, a woman in a blue jacket clapped her hands loudly to attract the attention of all the employees. She immediately revealed that Model in the City is aired on cable channels and not terrestrial. But new actors should know that this is a big opportunity for them to prove themselves, as the show will be aired on Itiva and other social media platforms. Right, it's exactly as Murney expected. Since several agreements have been made with this academy, it is possible to make a great debut even in small gear. When she realized this, Murney looked thoughtfully at the camera crew. That's right, her target is indeed close at hand. After a few hours, the shooting was over and the whole cast went on vacation. It seems wrong to lose such freedom. Murney, who had taken a seat in a chair, said tiredly. At that moment, some stranger approached her. Nice to meet you, Mr. Murney, said the guy with glasses, greeting the girl. After saying that, he held out his card to her. The guy introduced himself as a representative of the DMTV station, Vod Mint. Taking the card from his hand, Murney introduced herself to him and explained that she didn't have her own card yet. Laughing, Mente asked the girl not to worry about it, then offered her a cup of coffee in a quiet place. But when Murney noticed that he seemed very energetic, the guy awkwardly scratched the back of his head and apologized for causing any inconvenience. However, he asked the girl to understand such haste as a sign that he desperately wanted to talk to her. Glancing suspiciously at Mente, the Catwoman wondered why such an unpleasant sensation was coming from him. At the same moment, she felt an incredible stench. It smelled like a fly born from their rotting feces was flying right in front of my eyes. This conversation is over for today. A man suddenly spoke, stepping in front of Murney. Valian immediately explained to Mente that the girl was his younger sister. And since she seemed very tired, the barbarian promised the boy that she would contact him later. Then, noticing that the two men's appearances were very different, the boy asked how they could be brother and sister. Valian was not stumped by this question, however, and so he was able to quickly orient himself and reply that they were half-siblings. Noticing the logical connection in that, Mente apologized and said goodbye. When the guy with the glasses left, Murney looked at Valian indignantly and asked when he had become her brother. The barbarian asked her partner if she shouldn't thank him first. Besides, Murney should have felt it too. This guy reeked of magic. Soon the two returned to Han Yusong's house. Oh, look at them. Why are you bastards here? The guy sitting at the computer asked with a smirk. When he told Luke, Valian explained that he too found it hard to believe. But he couldn't help but believe it, because he could clearly feel the magic in the man's body. But not wanting to listen to him, Yuson continued to work indifferently at his computer and suggested that the barbarian should be sent to a doctor since his senses seemed to be in trouble. I swear by the name of the steppe! Valian suddenly shouted, placing his palm on his chest. I'm no more and my feelings are fine. Luke, I know you don't trust me, but please trust me this time. These are not idle words. A great warrior of the steppes swears on his heart. I'm sure of it. After letting the barbarian say it, Murney confirmed his words. She told Luke that she still remembered the smell, and the scent she'd smelled today was no doubt a demon's. Hard to believe, but it was true. After listening to the two of them, Han Yusong didn't say anything and continued to stare at the monitor silently for a while. Jumping down from his desk, the boy walked to the door and out of the office. Io was sitting in the living room, and when she sensed an angry Luke heading toward her, she turned to him perplexed. Did you hear that? Tell me everything you know right now! Yusun yelled angrily, grabbing the uncomprehending goddess by the scruff of her neck. When Io replied in a panic that she didn't know anything, the enraged guy shouted that if she did, he would remind her. Sylvia ran up to him, asking him to leave the goddess alone. But Yusun immediately yelled at her to shut up. Soon both Io and Sylvia were lying bound on the floor. In tears, trying to free herself, the priestess asked what the goddess had done wrong. Io in turn asked the child not to worry about her. Yosin sat down beside them and asked Io to tell him what she knew. The goddess shook her head and said that she had no reason to lie to the boy and that she really didn't know anything. If that's the case, it can't be helped. Luke said disappointedly, rising to his feet. Io looked at him hopefully, wondering if he would let them go. However, Yusan didn't have that in his head either. Putting the bucket of water on the floor, the boy told him that whether it was a person or an animal, there were always ways to make them remember the right thing. When Luke lifted Io by the rope, she gave him a puzzled look and asked what he was going to do. "Did you know that water torture is very agonizing?" Han Yusong asked with a sinister laugh as he lowered the goddess into the bucket of water. Then, realizing that she had no other choice, Io decided to tell her. "Slit!" she shouted when her chin was a millimeter above the water. "There's a gap! Are you happy?" Bringing Io up to her face, Yusan reminded her that she had recently said she didn't know anything. Praising her for her honesty, the boy untied the goddess. Sitting down on her knees resentfully, Io commented that Luke's methods were too drastic. It was incredibly scary. Scary, you say? How can a body that doesn't even breathe be scared? You don't even have feelings, so you can't be tortured, Han Yusong explained, untying the rope on the floor. Hearing this, Io was stunned and realized how foolishly she had been spent. She looked at the boy admiringly and said that it was amazing that there were such ways to retrieve memories. Yusong asked the goddess to close the subject and tell him what the gap was. After a moment's thought, Io narrated that the gap was otherwise known as a spatial rift, and Yusong, by the looks of it, should be well aware of that. Sitting on the floor, Luke explained that there were many dimensions to this world, and the very fact that he had gotten to Midgard was an accident. And so the main question now is, did the demon come to this world by accident? Or maybe something or someone contributed to its displacement? Io immediately explained to the boy that it wasn't a coincidence. Most likely, someone had opened a gap between the two worlds, and the demon had managed to squeeze through. Besides, there aren't many creatures in this world that are connected to Midgard. Pointing a finger at Sylvia lying next to him, Yusan asked the goddess if she meant to say that one of those bastards had contributed to this. However, Io only replied that the boy was wrong and that the warrior squad had nothing to do with it. In this world, even before the squad moved, there was a being with ties to Midgard. And that being was Han Yusan himself. "Oh yeah? That's right," Luke said sadly, rising to his feet. The goddess immediately tried to reassure her child that it wasn't his fault. But Yusan only replied that it didn't matter now. The point is that he's the starting point, so he has to clean up his own shit. "Damn demons, they've gotten to my hometown," the boy said in a rage. And when Yusan had already decided to start investigating from the next day, Valian and Mirny approached him from behind and said they would join him. Luke looked at them in surprise and asked why they had made that decision. "Luke, I know you hate us. However, we are no less hostile to demons than you are. Use me. I will do whatever you command." Valian spoke, putting his hand over his heart. Awkwardly averting her gaze, Mirny backed him up. "She's certainly not as good as this barbarian, but be that as it may, she's pretty good at her job right now." And as such, the girl felt like she would be able to be a great support in this matter. Looking at the two unsurely, Yusan wondered if he should trust them and work together. "Child, trust them," Io said suddenly, grabbing the boy by the sleeve. "They may have shown you a lot of their bad sides, but they're still veterans who've been through hundreds of battles." Hearing this, Yusan looked at the goddess thoughtfully. After some thought, the boy agreed to their proposal. They said goodnight to each other and went to their rooms. And as everyone left the living room, suddenly someone's concerned voice sounded. "Excuse me, when are you going to untie me? Luke?" Sylvia said, lying bewildered on the floor. Meanwhile, in the main office of DM Studios, "She's really putting her best foot forward," the guy with the glasses muttered, smiling contentedly. "Of course, it's a shame she's of average height, but she has a pretty strong body and naturally white skin." Spreading a lustful smile, Wawanta wondered how this girl was crying in bed. This man's eyes are full of greed. Fixing his glasses, he realized it was time to make the call. The guy picked up his phone from the table and immediately dialed someone's number. The person he decided to call in the middle of the night was listed under the nickname Mirny Model XX. "Enjoy my appetite," with a sinister laugh, shouted Mente. Mirny picked up her phone and answered the incoming call. Finished chatting with the person she was talking to, she said goodbye and ended the call. The man she had just been chatting with was the DM chairman, Va Mente. "Done!" the girl said tensely, looking at Valian sitting next to her. The barbarian looked at her in surprise and asked if it had been so easy. Mirny turned around and explained that demons were always the same when they were in heat. Besides, it wasn't a sin to be so beautiful. When Valian heard his partner say that, he looked at her with a puzzled expression. When Murney asked what that strange look was, Luke came into the living room and pointed out that going to a demon without the right things was like going to a picnic in the spring without preparation. Walking up to them, Luke threw 2 smartwatches on the table. He then explained that the DM studio was a place that was buzzing with sexual favors and forced sponsorship. If any unforeseen circumstances arise, leave at once, the guy warned them. Other than that, you should keep in mind what I'm about to tell you. Do not, under any circumstances, let your guard down. Otherwise, that demon won't give you a chance and you'll die. Soon, Mirny and Valian arrived together at the main office of DM Studios, and after meeting with Vomente, they went up to the 7th floor of the building together. Walking ahead of them, Mente told them that compared to other agencies, DM Studio is a bit different. If Mirny signs a contract with them, she can get various benefits. Looking at the demon's back, Mirny realized that if those who were not aware of the DM's criminal activities heard it, they would definitely fall for it. Valian, for his part, noted that the people of this world were masters of talking. "Ah, Chairman," suddenly heard the satisfied voice of a blue-haired woman walking towards him. Noticing Yongjong, a surprised Myungtae asked why she was here. She smiled at him and explained that she just wanted to see him. Then, looking behind him, Yongjong saw Mirny and Valian and wondered if they were newcomers. The chairman, however, replied that they were not yet. Those two had just come to take a look at the agency. Recognizing this, the blue-haired woman moved closer to the guests. "Nice to meet you, I'm Du Youngjong," she introduced herself, extending her hand to Mirny. Staring blankly at the woman, Mirny immediately realized what kind of game she was playing. The DM agency rep is a lustful pig, and this woman must be a seductress. Realizing that it might come out unconvincing, Mirny still decided to try to play a reckless fan Do Yeonjung. Grabbing the blue-haired, embarrassed woman's hands, the girl admiringly told her that she had reviewed all the movies and doramas featuring her. "She's so beautiful, isn't she?" "Mr. Wu Myanthi," a loud male voice was suddenly heard. Feeling the demon's terrifying aura nearby, Mirny and Valian fell into a stupor. When he approached the chairman, the unknown man reported that the director had summoned the boy. In response, Monta scratched the back of his head awkwardly and explained that he was now receiving guests. Hearing this, the secretary turned around and, correcting his glasses, said that he would tell the director so. At the same moment, Maya Yongtae asked the secretary to wait, and calling Yongjong with him, suggested that the 3 of us discuss something. And while the stranger had his back to Mirny, she noticed a strange symbol on his wrist. Soon the 3 men moved farther away so the guests couldn't hear them. That's when Catwoman realized everything. This secretary smells particularly sinister. He is a descendant of the King of Flies from the Maggot Army. Mirny approached her partner and asked if there were any survivors. Looking at them tensely, the barbarian replied that, as far as he knew, there were no survivors from the Maggot Army. Apparently, they had used forbidden magic. That's right, none of them could have survived. Mirny saw them all die with her own eyes. However, what she was seeing now could mean that the larvae were alive. Without taking her eyes off the secretary, the girl asked Valian if she should check it out. But the barbarian only blocked her passage with his hand and asked her not to act hastily. The maggots can't be alive. It's simply impossible since Valian saw the death of the king and the entire maggot army with his own eyes. However, now the 2 of them don't even have a chance of winning if this demon is even a 2nd-level demon. And about the higher-level demons, it's already pointless to talk about, as the outcome is obvious. Realizing that the best choice would be to tell Luke about it, Mirny turned to Aram. But Aram didn't answer even after a few seconds. "Shit! Looks like the worst has happened." Mirny and Valian are trapped. Finished talking to his colleagues, Monta apologized to his guests for the wait. Catwoman immediately asked him not to worry about it, then pointed out that the phones didn't work here. But the representative only replied that this happens quite often here and asked not to worry about it, promising that everything will work in time. Deciding to change the topic of conversation, the guy with the glasses licked his nose nastily. "Tell me what you think of the contract," he said, holding out his hand to the pink-haired girl. Remembering that he hadn't even shown her the contract, Mirny scratched the back of her head awkwardly and promised to think about it later. She immediately explained that it was a bit difficult for her to make such a difficult decision for the time being, after which she offered to call it a day. Walking to the elevator, the girl pressed the button. Now they urgently need to get out of here or this trap will completely slam shut. After standing at the elevator door for a while, Myrnie noticed that she had failed to call the elevator the first time. She realized this and began to pound the button hysterically. It wasn't until a few seconds later that it came to the girl's attention that the button didn't work. "Stand back," Valian muttered, standing behind his partner. The man ran around and tried to punch the elevator door with his fist. However, all his attempts were in vain. He was unable to inflict a single scratch on the door, even with his most powerful blow. Turning around, the two members of the warrior squad felt someone heading towards them. "Excuse me?" The secretary's voice came again. "We were in a hurry and apparently we were indiscreet. The director says he wants to meet with you."
Pet the cat.